If I'm going to build drive, typically I use frustration to do that. And to create frustration, you have to have some type of restraint on the dog, whether it be a fence. You can put him behind a fence so he can't. You're restraining him because he can't physically get to whatever you're frustrating him with because there's a fence, a barrier between them. Or you can put him on a back tie in a harness, or you can, as a handler, you can post him out. You don't even have to have him on a back tie. If you want to just be the back tie yourself, you just post him out, hold him on the harness, and have somebody else tease him and frustrate him in front of him. But the key is, we're building frustration. We're not just letting him free chase it because he doesn't have to work to get it that way. So when he does get it, he didn't have to work as hard. It doesn't mean as much. If I can hold him back, and it's just like what we were doing there. You're pulling him back a little bit. There's opposition reflex there, but there's also some frustration, and he wants to go there to get that because he knows there's a reward when he gets there. So now he's a little frustrated, which makes him, try to focus or pull a little bit harder to get back into it. So when I'm doing frustration exercises or drive building through frustration, I'll have a handler restrain him, and I'll get in front of him and I'll tease him with a toy, and I build a lot of enthusiasm. And whenever that arousal level is at its highest state that it's going to be, now with every dog that state's going to be different. But if he is at this level when he's running around chasing things freely, and I can get him anything above this, and I can get him up to here, then we'll let him explode into it because now we're building that arousal level, we're building that drive up a little bit. And then gradually we're rewarding him by letting him explode into the toy, and we're rewarding him when his arousal level comes higher and higher and higher. So the faster you get excited, the faster we get to let you go, which just makes him that much more excited the next time. So it kind of is a snowball effect. But it's all that's done through frustration. And like I said, you can either do it from restraining him with a harness, or you can do it behind a fence, from teasing him, because again he can't get through the fence to get to it. And maybe if I'm doing it behind a fence, like if this represents a 40-foot stretch of fence, over here there's a gate, and I may have that gate open, but I'm teasing him over here and frustrating him, and then slowly I'm moving this way towards the gate, right? And I'm frustrating him. Maybe one time maybe it's just a 4-foot fence. Maybe one time I'll pop over the fence and let him have the toy, or maybe one time I'll just keep working here, and all of a sudden there's an opening, and he can go through it before he even has a chance to think. He's gone through it, and he's got the bite in the toy.
And you're working that, timing it to the state of arousal.
I want that state of arousal to be as high as I can before I let him explode into the toy. And you'll hear me say the word explode into it. It's not like there's nothing lazy about it. If he just kind of boobles over, if he's free off leash, and he boobles over and he picks up the toy and he kind of mouths it and he's half-hearted about it, there's no real intensity there. But if I can put pressure on him and hold him back and have somebody else build frustration, now that intensity is building, and simultaneously you're going to let him go, and it's going to be a very short explosion, just a couple feet or less, and maybe 10 inches. He explodes into it. As soon as he grabs it, now you're immediately putting opposition reflex back into the toy. So you're grabbing the toy and trying to challenge him over it so he has a reason to want to keep it. Because if you just let him get it, and there's no game associated with it, or there's no threat of him losing it to you, it doesn't become as meaningful. But if he knows that there's now a game involved in keeping it from you, you're trying to take it back. Therefore, he wants, again, opposition reflex. You're trying to take it from him. He's trying to take it back from you.
So a little tug would be
exactly.
best.
Well, that's what I'm talking about. Like there is a game of. Well, you can play tug with a ball and a string. You can still play the same game.
Does it depend on what the dog likes the best?
For sure.
Okay.
And with a puppy like that, you're not going to use a big, hard, solid rubber ball. Maybe you use a tennis ball with a string tied through the middle of it. We've got a bunch of those. Or maybe use a soft tug toy, or maybe just a rag on a flirt pole. But the big thing is, regardless of what toy you use, the process is the same. It's all about frustration until he's at the highest state that he's going to be. We're not going to wait for him to be like a Malinois. We're going to wait for him to be more than he is otherwise. And then when he's more than normal, we reward that. And then the next time, okay, so now we've established this as our baseline. And now we're going to try to raise it a little bit. And then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, until he naturally defaults to, there's something moving in front of me, there's some restraint behind me, that's just going to make him bananas for it. And now it's not going to happen tomorrow, but that's the step that we take. And I can tell you, at least with Malinois, it doesn't take long for them to understand. A little bit of pressure behind them and a little bit of movement in front of them, and they go straight into orbit. And that's what we want. If you're trying to build drive, that's how you build it, is through frustration.
And you do it How often do you do that?
Certainly not every day. I mean, I may do it every other day. You know, what I would maybe I do detection on Monday, and then drive building exercises on Tuesday, and then come back. You know, so we do it completely separate of each other. Here we're teaching behaviors with food, and then we do drive building exercises outside for a toy, and then the next day focus and commitment and like using your brain for food, and then back out there where you don't have to use your brain. You're just being a maniac for the toy. And we may do that for a year separately with your dog. And then at some point now we pair those two together. We've now built his toy drive where it's higher than his food drive. And so outside the toy means more than the food. Inside we've developed a clear-headed search pattern because he's been, from the time we started, he's always had to use his head and you know, be clear-headed in searching. And so now when we pair the food with the search behavior, the goal is hopefully we can maintain that clear-headed search pattern, and the reward is even more meaningful than it's ever been because now the reward is the toy that we've made him batshit crazy for before. And that's what we're doing with that puppy. You know, his reward was a toy for the longest time. Now we're using food a little bit because we're shaping some other behaviors. And the advantage of using food is I can get a lot more repetitions in. There's no rules. He doesn't have to be polite. He doesn't have to have an out yet, which means I don't have to fight him over it. Because he doesn't have an out yet. So if I give him a ball, now that he's pretty possessive, so now we've got to choke him off of it, and that wears him out, it wears the handler out, and we're losing valuable training minutes or seconds every time we have to go through that process. With food, click, food, there's no conflict at all. I don't have to fight with him, I'm not wearing him out. I can get a lot more repetitions in per training session that way. But eventually, when he has rules and he's willing, he outs really clearly, then I can use a toy, because that's going to even motivate him more. In here, he doesn't have to work that hard. There's 130 places I can hide it, but he doesn't have to work hard to find any of them. When I take him into a big warehouse where there's 10,000 places to hide it, he's going to have to work pretty hard. So his paycheck needs to be a little bit more. And a toy with those dogs is a bigger paycheck than food, but I teach all the patterns and all the basic behaviors with food because I can get a lot more repetitions in that way. And then once they understand it, now I can give them the big paycheck.
And if he's mostly going to be working in the wilderness, when do you switch the environment? Or do you?
Well, certainly you would. I mean, what we're doing here is just teaching, we're just imprinting the odor. I guess with our dogs, they're in here till they're probably 8 or 9 months old, learning. Now, I'll bring a lot of I'll bring desks in here, and I'll bring chairs in here, and tables, and all kinds of wall lockers, maybe, all kinds of other stuff, so they learn to search. And maybe I'll even bring one of my little Razor dune buggies in here and do like miniature vehicle searches, you know. Okay. So I can do, because this room represents detection work. So
situational.
Yeah, so you know, when he come in here, he's already kind of programmed to do detection work. So there's no better place to introduce a new detection hurdle than to do it in a room that he already knows means detection work.
Because you're changing one variable.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to take him from here where he's searching in these tubes to outside where he's searching on a vehicle in one step. You know, what I'll do is I'll take him from the tube to the wall, because now he's searching a plane that's similar to a vehicle, the side of a vehicle, right? And so now he understands, okay, now we're searching this. Or maybe I'll put him on a box, and when he's searching that box clearly, then maybe I'll take that box and put that box in a vehicle, open a door and set that box in the seat, or maybe set it on the bumper or in the trunk or something. So those are all bridges, you know, so we go from this step to this step to this step. We don't go from here, from step 1 to step 10. And honestly, if I want to search him on a vehicle, and I've got a room that he knows is always detection work, why not just bring that vehicle into that room if it's possible? That's going to make it much more easy for him to progress to searching that vehicle, as opposed to taking that vehicle outside where maybe now the vehicle's in an area where we always do tracking, or where we always do bite work, or we always do obedience. So we're creating a little confusion that isn't necessary. That's the way that I would do it, at least. That's the way that we do it.
And that's just the change of one variable.
Yeah, and in here you can also bring in some of your distractor odors that you would find out in the woods. You know, other animals.
So everything you can think of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of stuff too.
Okay.
But you know, at the same time, you're not going to have to keep me in here for that long, because you're working not just in one environment, but kind of you are. I mean, if you're just working outside to a dog, anything natural, whether you're working fields or woods or stream crossings or whatever, it's still, to the dog, there's not a ton of difference there. It's all a natural outdoor setting. Whereas if I'm looking for explosives or narcotics, it may be inside a schoolhouse today, or a big industrial warehouse the next day, or a vehicle the next day. You know, there's a lot of different environmental changes that a true wilderness search and rescue dog maybe isn't as big of an issue. Like you're not going to be searching the subway in New York today and then get called out to work, you know, to do water work out, you know, in a canal the next day. I mean, I don't know. Maybe you are. I don't know, but
Rarely. I mean,
Yeah.
rarely they ask building a vehicle, but I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I understand.
so you know, if you're only going to be searching in one main environment, you could probably take him into that environment pretty quick. But I would do it like this. I would set it up so.
Change nothing but the environment.
Yeah, I mean, I would set it up so it's still pretty easy, and we still set him up for success. And then maybe, you know, you can take the tubes off of that. Once he understands to put his nose in that tube, you can take that tube off and just use this. Now I can cover this up with leaves, you know, and start to do that kind of stuff. Or I can take, you see that bottle of dish soap?
Yep.
That little PVC thing that's cut at an angle beside
Yeah.
that. Can you grab that for me for a second? So I can take this thing and push it down into the ground and put this on top of it. And I can drive this all the way down in the ground. My odor is completely contained there. I have these holes drilled around so the odor, I actually use a shorter version. I don't use this. That's stuck in there. I don't use this actual one. I take this and I cut about an inch of that crap off. So when I stick it down in here, this tube doesn't block these holes. So it actually is going to be in here kind of like that, so the odor can still come out around the side. And then I can push it all the way down in the ground until these holes are just barely up. And then this will be all the way down here flush. So this is essentially all that's going to, you know, you got this much of it sticking out of the ground.
Okay.
And there's odors coming out of the side and the top. Now I can cover it up with about anything. And this is not much of a visual cue. You can even paint this thing if you want. Just make sure you got a bunch of other painted ones out there as distractor odors so he's not allergic to painted PVC.
Mm-hmm.
But, and all of this is kind of based on this concept. You know, when we start this, we can go to stuff like this pretty quickly. And now we can put this into environments that are very similar where he's going to be searching. Like I said, I can put this down in the ground and cover it up with leaves. And it's going to look to a young puppy very similar to what, you know, what he's going to be searching in an actual environment, you know, in his actual, you know, called out, you know, operational environment.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I use all those things as bridges. So if I start with this, when I go to step 2, I try to incorporate that concept into step 2. And then whatever concept step 2 is, like for me, step 2 is over here on this little wall. So step 1 is there's a funnel for him to stick his nose in, right? And step 2 is there's a funnel for him to stick his nose in. The difference is the plane. It goes from being on the ground to being up on a wall. And the way these work is I put the odor in here. The odor goes all the way down in the bottom. You know, the odor steps way down in here. They can't put their nose all the way on it, but they put their nose in and they can get all the odor. And then I can, from the back side of that wall, I reward them through this hole. Same concept, click and treat, click and treat, click and treat. And, you know, so they're putting their nose in here, they're filling their nostrils full of the odor. And there's no food in there. I click, I put food in their mouth. So it's the same concept as this, but it just changes the plane a little bit. So now it's on the flat wall. And then once they understand that, and I use this because it doesn't overwhelm them. Because if I go straight to this wall, it's just overwhelming. You know, he's used to searching 3 things, and now there's 50 things, and it's a lot bigger, and there's a lot more places to search. And so I can take this, and this is movable. I can put this in the exact same spot where he's had these tubes. So he says, okay, every time I'm here looking this way, I search. Now I'm not searching on the ground, now I'm searching on a wall, but it's the same concept. And now when I take, okay, now I steer him this way, and I say, now it's the same concept as this, but it's just bigger. And now when now I run down the side of a car, at least it's very similar, you know, in appearance to the dog. It's a solid wall, or a row of wall lockers or whatever. So when you go to step 2 or step 3 or step 4, take the tools from the previous step if you can and use those as a bridge to get you to the next step.